I remember one time, you know Ricky Skaggs,
Yeah.
the country singer? Ricky, I think this was like 1988 because I just met Ricky. He had just been introduced to the prophetic, and we introduced him to Bob Jones, and he loved Bob right away. He and Dolly Parton were the honorary chairmen of the National Save the Eagle Foundation. PBS was filming this big special where he and Dolly went up into this big, they called it an airy, but where they were raising these young eagles. And he and Dolly were supposed to each pick an eagle, baby eagle. They would name it and they would band it and all this stuff. And then they would each take them out and release them. And they, it's just the Save the Eagle Foundation.
Yeah.
And anyway, Ricky called me that night. He told me what he and Dolly had been doing. And he said, this is the craziest thing I ever had happen to me. He said, I had this eagle on my arm, and it turned around and looked at me, and it was Bob Jones's face on that eagle. He said, it wasn't a vision. That eagle's face turned into Bob Jones's face. And he said, I know it. I said, well, call Bob. I said, don't tell him anything. Just call Bob and see what he says. So I gave him Bob's number. He called him. Bob would pick up the phone. He'd know who was calling before.
Yeah. Oh
he would answer. He'd go, hello, Ricky, or whatever. And he said, hello, Ricky. I saw you in that tree today. I seen what you were doing and what you named your eagle and all this. I mean, it was just like, Bob had really been there seeing it. It's weird.
Because Bob knows about eagles and doves.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And also it's a prophetic act that the eagles were being released.
Yeah, he named the whole thing was a prophecy to Bob. Amazing. And he said, follow those eagles. Their lives are going to be prophecies.
We're just going to dive right into it. The last time we saw you was in Moravian Falls, and I actually have some great stuff from there, but there's so much more that actually both of us wanted to ask you. Listening to the Final Quest audiobook, and it's just profound, that vision that you had. Such a vivid, deep, intense vision, and it sounds like it went on for hours.
Actually, that was a series of visions that I got over about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And it started with a dream. The first chapter was a dream. And then I kept having these experiences where I was like in a different world, and I'd write them down and I'd publish them in our newsletter. But after about, I can't remember how many it was, I saw this is making a whole story. This is going somewhere.
Wow, so the vision keeps growing and expanding and getting deeper.
Yeah, but it took me a while to understand how it fit together as one whole message, one whole story.
Wow.
It was almost like living a second life.
Yeah.
I go to sleep and I dream. I'm with these people I know very well,
Yeah.
Or I'd be sitting there working, and it's like all of a sudden I'm in a different place. I don't know how to explain it, but at times there's such an overload to it. It's like there's too much coming at me from both lives,
Wow.
And but I love it. I love it. I feel like it's what I've been praying for many years to experience. when I prayed for about 25 years to, do what Paul spoke of doing, being caught up into the third heaven. And, some of the experiences are glorious. Some of them are very hard, very difficult. When I come back, I'm like frazzled. It's like it really happened. As far as I think it's what turned my hair white prematurely. It really has been like living two lives parallel in a way.
Amen. Wow. Because I've had times when I've had a dream and I felt like I came back from a place, and I can't even relate to others that yes, it really did happen.
Yeah, some of them are so real, you remember them like they really happened. Like a lot of dreams, 10 minutes after you wake up, you can't remember what it was. Some of them are a little stronger, but they'll fade in a day or so. But these never fade. It's like this really happened. They're like real memories.
Yeah.
And they're so.
And then will you sometimes have signs in the natural that confirmed the encounter you had in the spirit?
No, what I get more is scriptures. And that's really my nature too. I want to see it moored in the Word of God. I want to see it, that this is sound doctrine, that this really fits with the Word. And I spend so much time in the Word.
Yeah.
But, occasionally I do have things that happen that I know are a confirmation or are a part of the message. And I'll fit them into the message.
Like there's so many pieces to the puzzle, and they come in multiple realms in multiple ways. So it's almost like a 4-dimensional puzzle that's coming together.
Right.
And you said something in the final quest where you took your sword and you plunged it into the ground. That sounds like what you're doing by confirming your visions with the Word of God. You're really resolutely plunging your sword into the ground with it.
Yeah, it became an anchor in a very, very slippery place. And I could tie myself to it. Now I think that's what we're supposed to do with the Word. All of these are metaphors.
The entire world, I believe, is drawn and attracted to the supernatural. That's our true nature. Signs, wonders, and miracles follow the believer. And that supernatural world is something everyone is drawn to. And here you are living it in a very amazing fashion. You said not just in dreams, but even when you're speaking to someone, it might just come to you while you're in a waking mode.
I think the Lord does speak to everyone differently because He made every snowflake different. He made us all diverse.
Job 33:14. For God may speak in one way, or in another, yet man does not perceive it.
Over my life, I've moved through different ways that God would use me. I went through a point where I was focused on deliverance and, other things, and even the prophetic. Where I used to get a lot of prophetic revelation about people. I'd meet somebody and I'd know all these details about them, and then I had to make a choice. The Lord said, you can either see the forest or the trees, but it's going to be hard for you to see both together. He said, I'll give you the big picture, something much more expansive, but, it's different from when you're seeing every detail about people, or a lot of details about people and all. I think that's a choice that King David made. I also had to make a choice, not in any way compare myself to King David, but he was a prophet. He was an incredible worship leader, musician, but he was called as king. And there was a point where he had to lay aside his prophetic gift. That's what it says. You see King David calling for the prophets when he needed to hear from them, because he needed his focus on the administration of Israel. And I've been through periods, 2 7-year periods where I had almost no prophetic revelation, but I had a different job to do. So, these are seasons in the Lord.
Right, and you have to go through those seasons.
Yeah, it was part of my job. I would much rather be sitting off in my mountain cabin having revelations and all. But, the Lord had other jobs for me to do. And it was all a part of his work too. I'm just now entering back into another season, getting a lot of revelation. But I almost never get personal words for people anymore. It's rare. It is, I do occasionally. But it used to be all the time. I met somebody, I started seeing stuff.
Yeah.
But he had to take that away so I could have the other.
Wow, praise God. I actually felt the power of God when you said that you're in a season where you're getting more revelation, deeper revelation. I felt like a flood of revelation is coming to you. Opening up to getting revelation about the nations and what the next move of God is. So it's become more expansive.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, and that's really where my heart is.
Yeah.
To see kind of the force, the big picture.
Colossians 3:23. And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men.
I remember thinking one time about Paul the Apostle making tents. I said, what a waste. He could have been out there preaching the word, getting people saved, starting churches, and he's having to work at this menial task of making tents. Lord said if he had not been willing to do that, he could not have trusted him with the great revelations or power. He said we have to be moored to the practical and to the mundane. And he said one of the most important things for us to learn, if we're going to be trusted with a really high revelation, is that to turn the things you dislike the most into worship. You know, because everything we do, we're supposed to do as unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And he has drudgery in all of our lives. Somewhere there's something you're like, you don't want to do. Well, that may be the most important thing for you to do. And turn it into worship.
Oh.
That's what I learned to do with carpentry. I thought I'd be a carpenter because that's what Jesus was, and I'm going to be, this must be a noble profession. Man, I was in it for 2 weeks, and I think, this is a bad job. You know, this is terrible. But when me and a few other new believers decided we're going to build these houses as if Jesus was going to live in them, because he said, as you do to the least of his little ones, you're doing for him. We started building with all of our heart. Pretty soon what had been drudgery became one of my greatest joys. I couldn't wait to get to work in the morning. There were times I didn't want to go home at night.
Yeah.
I didn't have a family then or anything, but I wanted to keep working. I loved it so much.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of very gifted people, in my opinion, live wasted, frustrated lives because they only wanted to do the fun part. Mm-hmm. They didn't embrace the drudgery and turn it into worship and do it unto the Lord. That's why you see Brother Lawrence, who wrote the book Practice of the Principle. He had the best times of his life while he was washing dishes.
Wow.
Brother Lawrence lived in the 1600s, serving as a lay brother in a Carmelite monastery in France. He's remembered for the deep intimacy he experienced with God, as recorded in the classic Christian text, The Practice of the Presence of God. His duties in the monastery were in the kitchen, washing dishes and repairing sandals. Because he spent so much time in the kitchen, he turned the drudgery of his chores into a spiritual discipline, finding that he was able to delight in the presence of God at all times. He writes,
God has many ways of drawing us to himself. He sometimes hides himself from us, but faith alone, which will not fail us in our time of need, ought to be our support and the foundation of our confidence, which must be all in God. I know not how God will dispose of me. I am always happy. All the world suffer, and I, who deserve the severest discipline, feels joy so continual and so great that I can scarce contain them. There is not in the world a kind of life more sweet and delightful than that of a continual conversation with God. Those only can comprehend it who practice and experience it. The time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer, and in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquillity as if I were upon my knees before the blessed sacrament. The Lord does not ask much of us, merely a thought of Him from time to time, a little act of adoration, sometimes to ask for His grace, sometimes to offer Him your sufferings, at other times to thank Him for the graces, past and present, He has bestowed upon you. In the midst of your troubles, to take solace in Him as often as you can. Lift up your hearts to Him during your meals and in company. The least little remembrance will always be the most pleasing to Him. One need not cry out very loudly. He is nearer to us than we think.
Because he got so close to the Lord there.
That's amazing.
And that's so, don't waste your trials, don't waste these opportunities.
Yeah.
I think it also keeps us humble, and God gives His grace to the humble, not the proud. If we think we're too good for these things because we've got so much power, we're so spiritual, we're probably limiting how much the Lord can use us.
Yeah. And to be willing to be invisible, to be willing to be unseen, if that's what the Lord calls you to do. He may call you to be seen.
That's why Peter said that the testing of our faith was more valuable than gold. Now, how many Christians do you know that would get more excited about a test of their faith than if they woke up and found a big pile of gold? That shows where we have our vision, our focus, where our reality is. But if we really understood faith as the currency of the kingdom and the opportunity that every testing of our faith is, we would get more excited about the test than finding a big pile of gold. So,
everyone wants that gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me the gold. I want to hit the lottery. I want to,
Yeah.
But if we really knew, there's still a lot of things that cannot be shared publicly. Because, the writer of Hebrews, who I think was Paul, but it's debatable, after writing what is considered the deepest theological book in the New Testament, he says, I wish I could give you meat, I can only give you milk. He called the book of Hebrews milk. All this about Melchizedek and everything, milk. That isn't even meat yet. But he couldn't share it, and he talked about some things you only share with the mature. You just cannot share publicly. You can't, it's not personal revelation or anything. It's just, you've got to wait for people to mature before they can handle some things, or they'll choke on it. And, one of the warnings about the last days was, woe to those who nurse babes in those days. I don't think he was talking about physical, literal babies. I hear that as, woe to those who keep their people in immaturity. And, I think the overwhelming majority of what you see being preached, being taught, and everything is milk. Because the overwhelming majority of Christians are still babes in the faith. Can't even handle the book of Hebrews, much less. And that's milk, according to Paul. But you still can't share it. They'll choke. They cannot receive it, cannot hear it. They will choke on it. And you don't want to do that to babies, but you want to get them to the place as soon as you can that they can start eating solid food. The main thing that has to be done to accomplish that is, we've got to start preaching the cross. And the true Christian life is taking up your cross daily. True discipleship is that. The life of sacrifice. And there's a whole different mentality, I think, that we've got to have and that we've got to live. You can't preach something you don't live. If you take what Jesus said about his disciples, what he had said, these would be what defined his disciples, you'd probably think, I may not know any disciples. It's that challenging. And we may not. It is so intense and so different from the manifestation of Christianity in our times. The general manifestation and the general mentality of Christians in our times. And I'm really concerned because, whenever the Lord said, whoa, that's really bad. Yeah. This is something you don't want. I think it is going to be really bad for those who've kept their people in immaturity. I think I've missed some tremendous opportunities when I was so focused on this job I got to do, this meeting I've got to get to, and someone would come up, want to talk, and I'm sorry, I can't now. And I wasn't sensitive. The Lord brought that person. They could arrest him when he was going somewhere. He would stop, and if there was destiny and purpose on it, but I wouldn't see it until later. Where I think that was the Lord, and I missed it. I think I've done that an awful lot, and it's not good.
You actually, what you do is you have people come over and spend time with you, so you connect with them in a very casual home environment as well. So you're doing that. No. Oh
yeah. I have gatherings, porch gatherings, and stuff. I do have a lot of people that we get with, and I'm blessed with a lot of friends, but that still doesn't mean you can't miss them. Yeah. And it is, I used to have it seemed like everybody in the world wanted to come share their vision with me.
Right.
and I don't, I have trouble. I take in information much better reading it than hearing it. And I don't even remember this right after they've said it. It's hard for me to focus sometimes. But, they don't need my feedback. They just need a sounding board sometimes. But boy, it would wear me out. It would just absolutely, because I've heard them all many times over.
Wow.
And really I was too busy.
This is amazing. This is what you've gone through in order to gain the Father's heart. Because you've had to deal with so many people, not just in America, but around the world, who've read your books, who've heard your testimonies. So coming to the space where you have to deal with those masses, but in a very graceful way. You've got so much grace about you.
Well, I have to fight for it. Now, listen, these are sons and daughters of the King. And they deserve my attention. They deserve whatever I can give them. Now, sometimes I have to do what the Lord did. Said he set his face like a flint to go to Jerusalem. He avoided people, avoided crowds, walked on the water to avoid crowds.
John 6:15-21. Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. Now, when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and went over the sea towards Capernaum. And it was already dark. and Jesus had not come to them. Then the sea arose, because a great wind was blowing. So when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they willingly received him onto the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land where they were going.
He was walking across the Sea of Galilee because he didn't want to go through all of that. So there's a place for that. There's a time for it. And then there's a time when you can't do that. You really need to sit down. But that's, we have like our harvest conference where I get to do that. Mm-hmm. And we don't plan meetings during the day, so it's just hangout time. Mm-hmm. And I encourage all my staff, just hang out with the people. Just go. I used to have a golf cart when we do outside meetings. I'd just drive around and sit, join campfires or whatever, but those were such great times, and we need that. We need to plan more of those times. And I always, usually when I do it, I enjoy it, but I am a workaholic, and that can be a god. That can be an idol. Mm-hmm. But where I esteem my work more than people sometimes, and especially God's people.
When's the best time for you to do your writing?
Usually in the mornings, early.
How early is early?
I normally get up pretty early too, before sunrise, 4 or 5. I usually write until 12 or 1.
Wow.
But I have other work to do too, administrative stuff.
Mm-hmm. 4 o'clock in the morning every morning.
You get up at 4?
Yeah. Hi, Kirby. Hey, good morning.
Kirby is a handyman who has been working with Rick for 8 years and is like family. So what does he do it for?
Read, pray, meditate every morning. He's one of the most kind, thoughtful. I mean, he really care about people and stuff, He's the real deal,
I found it very touching that he cooks for you.
Yeah, we eat good when I come down here and work. We eat good, go out to the restaurant sometime. Then he do a lot of cooking, barbecue and stuff like that, That's what I like. He just want to be Rick. I mean, he don't want people, treating him different or nothing. He just want to be Rick, I mean, that's how he want to be Rick.
That's good. What do you gain from having a friendship with Bob Jones?
Well, it was huge. There was so much constant supernatural activity around Bob. Yeah. And, for about 3 years, it was constant, it was daily. And, he would dream dreams at night and tell us about them at breakfast, and they would come to pass that day, over and over, spectacular ways. And the level of things that we walked down, it's like almost every day we would sit down and say, this is better than the book of Acts. This is better, we saw really remarkable things. And then Bob got bitter. He went through a period of real bitterness. And some people blamed him for some stuff that weren't true and told him they were going to defend him and did the opposite. And anyway, he let it turn into bitterness. And he went into this thing for about 8 years where, it was really bad. We used to get with him every chance we got, but it was so hard because all he wanted to do was share bad things about these people. It was about as bitter as you've ever seen. But he would still have these spectacular revelations. Like he told us one time, in the midst of his bitterness, there are going to be 2 hurricanes hit right here this summer. And that, and then he had all that about the revival coming to Pensacola and all that became the Brownsville revival. And then for the first time in history, 2 hurricanes hit the same place in 1 year. Matter of fact, there's never been a case in history where 2 even hit the same place over all that time. But to do it in 1 year is just like Bob said. And then we saw he would have that level, but it would be like once every 6 weeks, when before that it had been daily and constant. And I think when he got over the bitterness, he came out of that. And he became one of the most Christ-like people I ever met. But he still never got back to that level where it was daily and constant. And we used to do things. I used to call him and give him a name. He wouldn't know if it was a child or someone who lived 200 years ago, or he wouldn't know. He would just tell me what you get. He could nail it. Unbelievable level. He told us about the San Francisco earthquake. Months before it happened, in a big vineyard conference, he told about it in the Newport. We're having a big conference in Newport Beach. He said there's going to be an earthquake. He said it was going to be that year. It was going to be 7 on the Richter scale. He said the bridges are going to be dangerous. And then he said, and the whole world is going to see it. And we're going, how's the whole world going to see an earthquake? Of course, it's the first game of the World Series. All the nations of the world were watching, and they saw it show, right on the game. The whole world saw it, but we had so much. That was almost constant with Bob during those years. Spectacular things. And we all walked in something a lot more back then, but a lot of that is seasonal. But it was truly a wonderful time. One of them, a friend of mine, was sitting with me in my office. And I give Bob his name. He was living in Kansas City at the time. And I called him out there. But my friend's sitting in the office with me. And Bob says, I see him. I see him right now. He's got a fever blister on his lip. And he did. He had a big fever. And he said, let me tell you, this is the enemy attacking his words. He's called as a teacher and all this stuff, but that was pretty common, that it's like Bob really was there. And sometimes you'd feel his presence. You would feel him in this situation. Talk to him later. He'd say, I saw you there today. And when Paul the Apostle said, when you come together and I'll be with you there in spirit, he really meant he was there. And it's like you see Ezekiel, he's being caught away to preach to different people. Kind of like Philip.
Ezekiel 3:14-15. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness, in the heat of my spirit. But the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. Then I came to the captives of Tel Abib, who dwelt by the river Chebar, and I sat where they sat, and remained there, astonished among them 7 days.
Anyway, we had that, and Bob just never rose back to that level.
So you So you have friends who are moving in greater anointings and
I
Bob
think they're starting to
Jones?
touch on something that is even a higher level.
Oh my goodness.
And nobody knows these people?
So people know them, but they don't know what's going on with them.
It's not. That's amazing.
Because
The
he would
Lord-
get too much attention.
Yeah, maybe the Lord's
Yeah.
told them. Don't.
And I really think it's the Lord that they stay hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had another real prophetic friend lived with us for a few years, but he would tune in on any argument anyone on my staff had with their spouse.
Wow.
Oh no.
You come in that next morning, he would be waiting for you.
That's incredible.
He'd say, I'd never look in on your personal life or anything, but the Lord just shows me things I can't help but see it. I saw the conversation you had with your wife this morning, and he said, demeanor is everything, and the more you talk, the meaner you got.